Hello, this is Jack Cavanaugh, author of an American Family Portrait series. And this is the second video in this series of videos that is taking a look back on the 20th anniversary of the first book that came out in an American Family Portrait series. In the last video, I told you why I write Christian historical fiction. In this second video, I wanted to tell you about the incredible power of historical fiction to touch our lives and our souls, as well as open up the entire past for us in a way that has never been done for us before. And so I want to describe to you the phenomenal narrative tool that is used in historical fiction and by historical fiction authors, and how this tool has changed the course of my life, literally, from teaching history to telling stories that are set in history. Now, let me show you how this works. This might be painful at first, but stick with me. I want you to imagine something. I want you to imagine that you are back in school, sitting at your desk, and your teacher is going up and down the rows and putting slips of paper on everybody's desks, assignments for a report that they are to research and write. As she comes by your desk, she puts that slip of paper down on it, and your topic is this: describe and defend the role of the sinking of the Lusitania and how that played into the bringing of the United States into the Great War. Exciting stuff, isn't it? Sends a chill right through you, just remembering those days. And so you would do what all good students do. You'd go to the library. You'd find a text, maybe similar to this one, and you'd begin reading The Road to Belligerency. The German submarine campaign began in February 1915. Wilson declared that Germany would be held to strict accountability if any American ships or lives were lost, and the submarines were given orders not to attack neutral ships. But on May 7th, the liner Lusitania was sunk without warning, with a loss of 1,198 lives, of whom 128 were American. The sinking of the Lusitania was a shocking event, but some of the contentions of the American government were of doubtful validity. Good stuff, isn't it? I love history, and I'm bored. The reason is we are so far away from the action. It is simply stating something that happened so many years ago that doesn't affect us in any way. And that distance, that distance that it places us from the action that took place, makes it boring. All right, let's go to the next scenario then. Scenario number 2. This time, imagine your neighbor comes running over across the yard. And in her hand, she has this book, and she says, "Oh, look what I just found. I just found my grandmother's diary." And she opens it up, and inside, between the pages, she pulls out this brittle, aged, yellowed clipping from the New York Times that is a warning against boarding the Lusitania and any other British ship, that those who do so at their own peril, and it's from the German embassy. And yet your neighbor says, but despite this warning, it's right here, she had it. Despite this warning, she went on board ship. And look here. And she starts to look through the diary and point to the different phrases and the description. And this is this woman's account of being on the Lusitania when it was sunk by German U-boats. And it describes how she was sitting in her stateroom and all of a sudden felt the bulkhead just shudder. And then there was a huge explosion, and the ship shuddered again and began to list on its side. And as she ran outside, she went looking for her daughter, who had gone off with a friend. And there was this deafening explosion. And she finally finds her daughter, but by now the boat is taking on water. And they have to wade through the dining area to try and get to the high side of the boat. And as they're wading through it waist deep, there are plates that are floating around and white napkins in the water that look like apparitions. And they sweep those aside as they get to the high side of the boat, only to find that all the lifeboats are gone or filled. And they have no choice but to climb over the railing and to look down at the water, and then holding each other's hands, they look at one another one more time and jump into the water. They're separated. The water closes over Grandma's head, and she fights for the surface, but her clothes are so wet, her shoes are so heavy, it's weighing her down, and she blacks out, and she thought for sure she was going to die. A little bit better, isn't it? Here we have a first-hand account, and it's good stuff. And in fact, it's great stuff. It's the kind of stuff that I look for when I'm doing my research. These first-hand accounts. I came across one of a first-hand account of a woman who survived a Zeppelin attack in downtown London during World War I. Really, really good stuff. But it works because now we are closer to the action, because we have an actual record of an eyewitness account. Now, let's take that one more step. This time your neighbor comes running across the yard, and she doesn't have a diary in her hand. She says, my grandmother's here. My grandmother's here for a visit. Did you know that she survived the sinking of the Lusitania by a German U-boat? Come on, she's going to tell us about it, and I want you to listen to it. I want you to hear it. And so now you go over, and there Grandma is, sitting there in the living room, quite aged by now. And as she sits there, she begins telling the story, and she tells what it was like sitting in that stateroom. And she tells how the floor and the bulkhead just shuddered. And then how the boat started to list, and there was a big explosion, and how she ran outside looking for her daughter, and how they waded through the water to get to the high side and through the dining area, and how they eventually had to jump over and into the water. But this time during the telling, you can see her reliving the experience in her eyes. You can see the fear there. You can see the uncertainty of what was going to happen. Her hands are trembling. Her voice is shaking as she relives this incident right in front of you. You are talking to an eyewitness in history. And it becomes more alive this time because now you are that much closer to the action. We're going to take this one step further. And this is the power of Christian historical fiction and the narrative form of being able to place the reader inside another person's point of view. In fact, when you are reading fiction, it's like stepping into somebody else's life. It's like stepping into their mind, their soul. It's like putting their body on like a suit of clothes. And every single thing that they see, you see. Every single thing that they think, you hear. And you live the experience through them. And it's this phenomenal point of view technique that brings history alive. Because now you are in the stateroom. And you feel the shudder of the bulkhead. And you hear the explosion, and you feel the boat starting to list, and you feel the terror of finding your daughter, and you feel what it's like to wade through the water in the dining area, and you feel what it's like to jump over the side and to have the water close in around you and go under and sink and black out and fear that you're going to die. Because you're not just reading it, you are experiencing it. You are living it. This is the power of historical fiction. It's personal because you were there. You are living the action. Now, if I were to keep on going, you would wake up in this small cottage, and you'd wake up to the sound of a baby crying. And you look over, and a drawer has been pulled out, a sock drawer, and the baby has been placed in there, sort of in a makeshift bassinet. And you look around, and there's nobody else in the house. And you call, nobody responds. And so you get up and you care for the baby, you care for the baby's needs, and still nobody's in the house. You walk outside, and as far as you can see, there's not another soul, not another house. But there you are, and you wait, and night comes, and still nobody returns. And then daylight comes for the next day, and still there is nobody. And for several days, you are there with their baby, with that baby, and you don't know whose house you're in, and you don't know what their situation is, and you don't know who this baby is, and how you got there. All you know is by snooping around inside the house, what you can deduce from the person's things in the house. And if we were to take it to that point, you are in The Allies, book number 6 of the American Family Portrait series. I had fun with that particular scene, and just how much can we learn about somebody that we've never met simply by going through their things? What would people learn about you by going through your things if they just had free reign and plenty of time? But the point here being, good historical fiction transports the reader back in time so that they experience the past for themselves. And that makes for exciting stuff, exciting history. Well, I hope you've enjoyed these first two videos. I have a lot more stories to tell about the making of the American Family Portrait series, and I'm anxious to tell these anecdotes and stories to you. Until now, the only people that have heard them are family and friends and a few conferees at writers' conferences. And I hope you've enjoyed this enough that you'll click one of those share buttons down there, or post a comment on Facebook, or tweet, or what have you, or maybe even do something old-fashioned like walk across the yard and talk to your neighbor and say, hey, Jack has these videos on, and I know you are sort of partial to history. You might like them. In the next video, we'll start talking about each book of the series, beginning with The Puritans, the very first one. This was the novel that debuted 20 years ago, that launched the American Family Portrait series. The Puritans has been and continues to be my all-time bestseller. Does that mean I've gone downhill from there? I don't know. I've often asked myself that question. Hopefully not. But it has captured the imagination of a lot of readers, and for that I am extremely pleased. Until next time, God's blessings on you.